Welcome to another episode of Built in the Bush. Starting to feel like a broken record, but this episode is another one of my favourites. Another ordinary person that's doing some extraordinary things. I had the pleasure of meeting James at one of Dr. Stephanie Burns' courses in Sydney, and the authenticity, the genuineness that comes from James is very obvious, and he's someone that is doing things for the right reasons. One of the few that I've come across in succession that approaches it in this way, and someone that I would be happy to refer any family on that's looking for a result that puts the family and the relationships as equally as important as the business. James wears two hats. He's a farmer in central New South Wales, but he's also a succession facilitator that travels all around Australia. So, James, welcome to Built in the Bush.
Thank you for the opportunity, Tanya.
Thanks for coming on and making the time. I know it's a busy time of year. Thank you for fitting us in. Before we get into the juicy stuff, let's start right at the start. So where were you built? Where were you born, James?
In Narromine, New South Wales, which is in the geographical centre of New South Wales.
Yep. And fine-tuned, did you always live there? Did you move at all during your childhood?
Yeah, I did. I've been fortunate in that my primary education was at Narromine, and then I went to Sydney where I had my secondary education and also my tertiary education. And then from there, I lived overseas for a year.
Yep.
But I'm sure we can unpack some of that.
Yep. So stabled in boarding school at Sydney and then uni at Sydney from the sounds of it?
Yes, that's right.
And what did you study at uni? What did you want to do at that stage?
Systems agriculture. And I studied at Hawkesbury, the University of Western Sydney Hawkesbury campus, which was formerly Hawkesbury Agricultural College. And it's interesting, at the time, I don't think systems thinking was fully appreciated. Whereas now, it's amazing how many people, when they know my degree, go, so you're trained in systems thinking. And it certainly has a greater credibility, I would say, now than what it did.
When you initially did it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine it would. How far back, without giving your exact age, how far back roughly are we talking?
I'm more than happy to say how old I am. I turned 55 within 2 weeks. And I went from school straight to uni. I was of the opinion that if I had a year off, maybe I wouldn't go back into studies.
Yes,
straight in.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, it was 1998 and I was there for 3 years.
Yep. And what did you want to be when you initially studied that? What was the plan? Or was there a plan at that stage?
My parents were in partnership with my parents, my father's brother and his wife. And then in the business employed were my 3 cousins and my brother. So I just went, there's just too many people there. I certainly wasn't interested in going back into that situation. Yep. So I thought, well, a degree such as the one I studied was a good base that could apply to so many things.
Yeah.
And so I went in there thinking that I would be working within the space of agriculture, but yes, very broad space. And I like that as the initial attraction.
Yep. And then you said you did a gap year in London. Where would you consider that you debuted though? Where was sort of after the study, the turning point for you that you went, this is what I think I want to be doing?
So I came back from overseas. I then worked for the Rural Assistance Authority, and that was only for a short-term contract. As I said, I wanted a job in agriculture. It was in the middle of a raging drought and there was not much going. Unlike my daughters who now, they finished their degrees and they've got people lining up, offering them jobs. And I had
Isn't that crazy?
older than me where that happened, but it certainly wasn't the case when I graduated. So this job came up for a 3-month term and I thought, oh, that'd be great, I guess, experience. And it was. There was a lot of young people that were temporarily employed. So we had a lot of fun. We were in the city of Sydney. So it was on Thursday, Friday afternoon drinks. So socially had a great time. Got to see everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people's financial positions and how they structured things. And that's something you don't learn at university. So that was invaluable. And then they wanted me to stay for another 3 months, and in which time I'd applied for a job with BHP in their wire products division. Okay. So I went into that role, and my region was the Pacific Islands and the west coast of America. Huh? So it was a really great job. I was based in 5 Dock back in the day when the head office for BHP Wire Products was in 5 block across the road from the old wire mill, which was on the Parramatta River. So, yeah, it was fun times. And in that period, I also married Amanda, my wife.
And so from there, where did life take you?
So it was 6 months into our marriage and the phone rang. Just to say, give you some backstory, before the phone rang, my father would speak to me independently, and my brother would speak to me independently about some of their frustrations, the old bull, the young bull. So I was a
So
bit
the family farm was still going on with the extended family, or just
No,
your dad?
sorry, you're quite right. My parents had separated from their partners, my aunt and uncle, and my brother was involved in the business. And
And you
he
had
actually
at this
rang me.
stage you were not involved in the business?
No, I was not involved. Always interested in having conversations. And my brother rang me one night and said, look, things have to change here. And he was frustrated and said, are you sure you're not going to come home? And this is back in the day when you had a landline. So my wife, my new bride, is on the couch listening. And then she turns down the TV and starts listening intently because she could hear the way the conversation was going. And it was me considering going back home. And at the end of the conversation, I said, look, I'll call you within a week to let you know. And I did call him within the week and also spoke to my parents and chose to head back home. And as my wife says, she was young, naive, and madly in love, and she followed me to the end of the earth.
Yeah.
I joke by saying, I don't know what she'd do nowadays, but yeah, at the time,
Lucky you made that decision then. No, I'm sure
yeah,
you did consult her and talk to her as well before you
absolutely.
decided that.
And look, we couldn't have asked for, when I say a better way of bringing up our children. Yes, we've had the normal stresses of droughts, floods, locusts, all of that. And it certainly has been stressful at times. But on balance, it's been a great place to bring up our children.
Yep. So talk me through that though. Saying you never come back to the farm and then coming back and knowing there were the frustrations and those sorts of things. How did that unfold and at what point did you start actually doing succession facilitation?
So I guess when I said I wouldn't come back home, that was in the previous extended family arrangement. And then when given the opportunity with just my family, my immediate family, I thought, no, this makes sense and I'd like to do that. And I consider myself one of the most fortunate people in agriculture in the sense that I was only with Amanda in a partnership with my parents and my brother and my sister-in-law for a few years. And we then were given the opportunity to actually exit out of that partnership. So that has allowed my family, the one that I was born into, to have great relationships. So this Christmas, the whole family and our children with their cousins, they adore one another, their aunts and their uncles, and my father is now deceased. There's always been this healthy bond around relationships. And I put that down to the fact that we were able to go and row our own boat at an early stage, whereas relationships were able to be just that, relationships, as opposed to be impacted upon with business decisions impacting relationships.
Which gets very muddy, doesn't it, as we both know?
Yeah. Now, to answer your question, how did I get into succession? What was happening was I was out socially, and I don't know whether I have a trusting face, but what would happen is people would start talking to me in confidence about their situation being family dynamics in a partnership. And I would give an opinion as a way how I thought maybe what would be useful advice. And then sometime later, I'd just circle back to these people and say, well, how are you placed? How are things going? And invariably what happened was the feedback was that was great advice. Then I thought, oh, maybe there's something in this. Maybe I can actually see the bigger picture and assist people. But that was just an idea. And then I was really fortunate to meet Alan Parker, who you've actually interviewed and where you and I first met was at one of his courses.
Yeah.
And I
He's
remember
and
sitting.
Dr. Stephanie Burns, actually. Sorry, just to interrupt.
Sorry, you are quite right.
We
It
had
was.
two legends.
Yes, both of them in the room, but it was Stephanie's workshop and Alan was there. So I remember sitting in a room with a group of people looking at Alan thinking, I don't know what he's got, but I want some of that as in the skill set. So that was, he sparked my interest. I've gone on and done a lot of his training and will continue to be associated with Alan. He allows me to pause and actually have time to really reflect and hone my
Mm.
skills. And then I did the last training that Lynn Sykes ever offered. Now, Lynn is the matriarch of succession in rural
Yes.
Australia. She really kicked it off as a concept, and I give a great deal of thanks to Lynn. And I occasionally catch up with Lynn. She only lives an hour
Mm.
away from me, and we'll catch up over a coffee. And I'm
So one of your
only gr-
informal mentors is
yeah,
the godmother of succession
yes.
planning in Australia. That is very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So, with that training, I then had a framework as to how to approach succession.
Mm.
Now, over the years that I've done it, I've now, I guess, changed it around a little,
Finessed.
finessed. And yeah, and another person who I've been fortunate to have exposure to is Michael Grinder. Now, he's based
Mhm.
in Canada, but it was Michael who specialises in non-verbal communications. His brother
Ah,
is John Grinder, who's world famous for neuro-linguistic programming. And
right.
Michael thought, well, if his brother is making a career and a large fortune, I would suggest, out of focusing on the verbals, Michael
Yeah.
went, well, when we communicate, when we speak, that only makes up 7% of the communication. So I'm going to focus on the other, the
Mm.
non-verbals. So I've been able to meet with Michael on 3 different occasions. So he's another person I give thanks to my skill set.
Yeah, God, that would be impressive. We might pick your brain later on for some of the top three tips from that one. So then, how do you said about wearing the two hats? How do you balance that then? If gone into that succession, you've got that hat that you wear. I don't know how majority of the time it'd be rare that you get to take that off for too long. I imagine.
I'm really fortunate in that I work for myself. I have been asked on a few occasions to work with other organisations in this space, but I'm really clear that I'll never do that because I
Mm.
actually want to wear both hats.
Uh-huh.
And when people ring me, they've already made up their mind they want me.
Yeah.
So if I say that I can't do it in May or November because I'm sowing and then harvesting, they just accept that. They don't go and go, oh, well, let's look up the next person. They always say, when can you do it?
Yeah.
So I have been able to make it work. And also, our business here, look, in reality, our family wealth creation is certainly within the business, the farming
Mm.
business. It's certainly not a hobby farm. But when we started, Amanda and I said, we're going to have a business where we don't rely on having employees, that we actually have contractors. So, contract spraying for the cropping is outsourced. And
Mhm.
the beauty is, the person that we've outsourced it to, he arrives with 2 spray rigs and another water cart. So, they get over country quickly,
Mm.
and that allows me to be elsewhere. And then at harvest, we have someone who comes with a couple of headers. We have our own tractor and chaser bin. And then we have another person that brings the trucks. Now, they're long-standing relationships we have with those contractors. Having said that, the spray contractor is relatively new because the previous person, after 20 odd years, was unable to continue it.
Mhm.
But we're about long-term relationships so that it can work.
And you see the benefit of that over and over, I would imagine, both personally and within your career.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
treat people right, you build those relationships, and there's only ever good things that come from that, isn't there?
Yeah, and I've always said it doesn't matter what you are doing in business, there's always someone else that offers, a similar
Mhm.
service or product. So why is it they would choose you? Is because they actually feel good about the process. One, they have belief in your ability, but they feel comfortable around you. So
Mm.
if you come with the attitude, I'm a provider of solutions, you will always be employed.
Yeah, very true. I like that one. Um, Rom, we've talked about some of your influences now. What about when you were younger? Or who were your role models or influences growing up?
Well, I didn't actually, when young, have any formal mentors, but of course, my
Mm.
father provided a strong work ethic, and my mother for that matter. And I look at what they've been able to achieve in their lives, and it's something that I would like to be able to replicate with my children. So I'm lucky that I have that as a foundational piece.
Mm.
And then at boarding school, I had a good housemaster who I looked up to. But it wasn't until I was a young adult that I had formal mentors. And I did the inaugural Grain Growers Leadership Program. And in that, you actually are matched with a mentor. Now, I was matched with, I can't even remember his name, but this person, yeah, it was more about him. and he
You
wasn't.
learned how not to be a mentor in that
Yeah,
relationship.
yeah, yeah. So the person, Joe Eady, who still to this day runs the program, a fabulous program,
Mm.
she could see what was happening, and so it's decided that I'd have another match. Now,
Yeah.
I actually suggested to Joe Murray Rogers, because Murray and I knew each other from sitting on a national review of agricultural policy and programs in Canberra.
Mhm.
And I still don't think there's been another review to this date. It was ended up being known as the Corish report, because Peter Corish was the chair of it. And I'd go to Canberra once a month, and we came up with 53 recommendations, of which 51 were accepted and 2 were not. In that time, I got to know Murray, but I said Murray would be a great mentor. So Joe reached out to Murray and he agreed. So we had a formal mentor process. And
Mhm.
the great thing about a formal mentor, there's a start and a finish. But to this day, we still keep in contact. In fact, I've only just read his newsletter, a Christmas newsletter to me, and,
Mm.
so we'll speak and write throughout the year.
Yep. Is that lovely? We also talk about it's the experience and things that shape us and our values and ultimately our decisions and life choices. Is there anything that comes to mind for you as one of your most successful failures? Something that at the time felt like it was not the greatest thing that could have happened, but on reflection, you can see that it redirected you to something better.
I don't think what I'm about to say answers your question directly, because nothing comes to mind other than, when I was at school, year 10, I was thinking, "I don't want to be here." Uh,
Mm.
my mother was smart enough to know. She actually said, "Okay," and after a while, she said, "Okay, you can leave, but you have to organise it yourself, what you're leaving to go to." So it was actually easy just to stay at school. And next thing you know, I then get the marks to actually go to uni. So that was a pivotal moment. Whereas if I had a
Mm.
mother said, "Oh, yeah, leave school," then what? I certainly would not be doing what I am today.
Yeah. Yep. That definitely is a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
And the other things we talk about are sometimes the trees that we unknowingly plant. So
Mm.
think people that we might have met, experiences we had earlier on, and then later on in your adult life or in your career, that person or something pops that relationship, that rapport, that experience pops back up and takes you into onto another pathway.
Yeah, I would say that I'm a natural networker. I love actually
Mm.
meeting people, and I retain, as I say, trivia. I'll remember
Yep.
people, I remember their story, and I'll be out and someone will say their story and I identify there's a need and how this person could be you, Tanya. Say, right, I know Tanya, I'll put you in contact. So I am often doing that, putting people in contact together and then me stepping out of that
Yep.
relationship. So that's where I think I keep on thinking back to all the people I've met. And as a networker, you maintain relationships. I
Yeah.
don't drop off people. So I'll just circle back and then out of the blue, someone will reach out to me. And that network is actually what has my business being successful, because I actually don't
Mm.
advertise that I do succession. It's people knowing me and what I do, and they're telling people about me.
Which is the best advertising it is, isn't it? Word of mouth, and then you know that you're already getting qualified clients. The people that are coming to you know how you operate and how you go about facilitating it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've said, looking back, I formally put together Cultivate Advisory in 2013. I was doing a little bit of work before then, but I formally, I guess, said, right, I'm a man for hire in 2000. So in 2013, I formally put together Cultivate Advisory and put it out to the marketplace. And over all those years of working with many, many families, I can honestly say that the old Pareto rule 80/20, 80% of those
Mm.
families, I'd be more than happy if they sat around a table having a meal with me. So I'm really,
Yeah.
really fortunate and privileged to work in this space, because
Yep.
essentially I'm working with good people who are just stuck.
And wow, so I don't ever think I've heard it articulated like that, but that's probably most country people in succession, isn't it? Good people
Yeah.
that are just stuck, that care about each other, that love each other, that want their business to work, but don't know how to communicate or move forward or get past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I say I do is create the safe environment for all to be heard and understood.
Mm.
And then me smart enough to know when to put down the metaphorical mirror when I'm holding it.
Yeah.
I can't hold it for too long because then I lose them. So
Yeah.
I've got to, in that moment, read the situation, put down the metaphorical mirror, them having seen enough to know what they need to do in the next step
Mm.
or to pause and reflect.
Yeah. And so talk me through them for those listening at home. What is different in the way that you, I mean, I know what it is, otherwise I wouldn't have you on here sharing your story, but what is it different in the approach and the way that you go about facilitating succession with the families you work with?
I think it's primarily that the people are the focus. So succession as a concept is a growth area. A lot of people are
Mhm.
thinking they can, in crude terms, cash in. From what I know, there's not many people that are trained like myself and that are truly focused on the people. A lot come from a financial background. So in that, it's not to say that an accountant couldn't do succession. Don't get me wrong. There are some accountants that are wonderfully balanced. So being an accountant, you're going to be left brain
Mhm.
thinking as in numbers, but there are some accountants that right brain being the people aspect.
But they are the exception
Yeah.
to the accounting profession.
Yeah. So I would say that I'm fortunate in that right brain in that I very much focus on the people. And whenever I go into a meeting, I'm often heard saying, if any of you walk out of here doing high fives or punching the air, I need sacking. And they all go, what? So, well, if you do that, it means that you've, well, in crude terms, you screwed over a sibling, a
Mm.
parent, or a child. But if you all walk away going, yeah, that feels about right. And importantly, you can see what your opportunity is. You actually leave the process still intact as a family.
Mm.
And that is my primary focus to get everyone across the line. And my process doesn't come down to a vote. It's not, okay, we'll vote on this. There is only an in principle agreement if everyone in the room agrees. Now,
Mhm.
the only reason they will agree if they feel they've been heard and understood and they can see how the family asset base provides them with opportunity. And it's never about the dollar value. It's about what opportunity can you receive? And then parents are telling me when I run into them, I could be out socially and they'll say
Mm.
what they've loved is from that process. One, the family's still intact, but two, they're actually seeing what their asset base has been able to do for the next generation and see the next generation building upon that.
And that's got to be rewarding for you, getting to see and hear.
Absolutely. And my greatest reward is at the end of my process. Always ask for a closing comment based on the day's events. And
Mm.
then I ask them to score the day out of 1 to 10. And just the internal joy I have in having people tell me, usually they're saying, I didn't think this was possible.
Yeah.
Um,
Very satisfying.
yeah.
So I'm just thinking doesn't sound like you've had too many bosses, but one of the other things we ask is what the best advice you receive from one of your worst bosses or perhaps mentors or influencers.
Good question. Just advice. I actually, at BHP Wire Products, I had a great boss and he was very much about take people on face value. And I thought,
Mhm.
and look, that was something that I'd observed as in the family I'd grown up in, but to
Yep.
actually have it articulated um, and just take them as you find them. Don't buy into the stories. Be aware of some of the stories
Yeah.
that may circulate, but how are people treating you?
So just to clarify, that's not to take them at face value based on what you judge from the external. That's meet them where they are as they are and make your own opinion on
Yes,
them.
that's
Am I
right.
hearing that right?
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful advice that we could all do with listening to that. Over the grid, some of the bumpy questions now, James. So, what gets you out of bed in the morning?
I'm task orientated.
Hmm.
I'm always thinking of the jobs that need to be done. So yeah, I've always got things to
That's
be
it.
done. And I guess that old adage, if you want to get something done, you give it to a job to a busy person.
Yep. Yep. Have you ever suffered from burnout or mental illness episodes?
I'm fortunate in that I haven't.
Mhm.
Certainly I can feel, run down tired after
Yep.
physically being on, and that might be at the end of harvest when we've gone for 3.5 weeks and long, long days and nights. But no, I haven't
But
suffered burnout.
you've naturally been able to manage your energy and your workflows so far.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Touch wood.
No, there are definitely personality types emerging with it. Yeah.
Well,
Do you have a
Amanda, sorry, I was
sorry?
just going to say, Amanda, we listened to your interview with Ben Law
Oh,
just
What did you?
during this week,
Yep.
and Amanda just made a comment. I don't think, James, you would suffer from that. Your personality is just the way you're wired. That's not to say I won't, but possibly, yeah, may not.
I would definitely agree with Amanda from what I know of you as well. You certainly don't come across as a personality type that's susceptible to it. Never say never under the wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
But, yeah. Do you have a self care routine though? Do you have some way of checking in with yourself, reflecting?
Probably no. I do actually go to the gym. I've been going to the gym for a year now, and
That's
that's
self care.
yes, it's 5:20 a.m. The alarm goes, and fortunately, I've got a neighbour trying to. Yeah, he was doing it, and this. Why don't you join me? And having someone say join you is a great motivator because you don't want to let them down. You say, right, I'll be there. We meet down the road and drive in together. And then the best part about it is the coffee afterwards with a few blokes. So,
Yeah.
yep, that is self care. And I certainly, well, it's usually after the exercise you go, yep, this is really good.
Yeah. Yeah. Someone said to me one time, you never regret actually exercising, but you'll always regret not exercising. It's
Yeah,
very
so
true.
true.
But that is absolutely self care. You're getting your exercise, you're getting your community, your social. Wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
What did you want to be when you grew up as a young boy?
When I was probably like in my teens, I actually thought of doing landscape gardening.
Yeah.
So that's unrelated to what I
Was
did.
that when you were
Well,
thinking about leaving school?
yes, 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 it
And then
was.
mum said you had to organise it, so landscape
Yeah, yeah,
gardening went out the window.
yeah. So what courses can you do? Look into TAFE and all this, and it was like all too hard. But it's funny that you talk about self care. We actually have created a really nice garden.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes my wife says, "You're so busy in the garden at times," and then other times she's saying, "I need to be busier when things need to be done." But I guess that's part of self care.
Yeah, well, that's your
Creating something.
creative outlet,
Yes,
the gardening.
yeah. Absolutely. And I actually had a friend, they just built a house and they actually asked, would I design a garden for them? So I have a garden
Oh,
that
wow.
I've actually designed from scratch.
Wow. It's definitely a creative outlet. Perhaps
Yeah.
another hat if you wanted to wear it.
No, not that one.
Busy enough for that. Keep that as your fun creative activity.
Exactly.
How do you define success these days?
It's around relationships. How
Mm,
successful are we as humans in our relationships? It's not about how much money we accumulate, but how we connect with other human beings, whether it's family or
mm,
friends.
absolutely. Has that changed, that definition, since over time
Yeah.
or when from younger?
Yes. When I was younger, my mother reminds me how I was always saying, "Oh, before I'm 30, or when I'm 30, I think it was, I'm going to be a millionaire."
Yeah, you're like the rest of us.
Yeah,
So do you
exactly.
remember at what point you started valuing people and relationships
I
more so?
suspect it was around the time I decided to do, well, say I'm a facilitator of succession and
Mm,
start Cultivate Advisory because
yeah.
that's what my motivator was for doing it, that actually helping people.
All right. So we like to turn things around here, and it's all about the way that we look at things. Question rather than asking our older self what we'd say to our younger self. I want you to pick yourself at a younger age, whether it's 17, 20, 23, whatever pivotal age you want to choose. What would they say to you if they could see you now, where you're at, what you're doing, your personal life, your business life? What do you think they'd be saying to you?
I think they would have said, James, it's all going to be okay. Don't, sweat the small stuff. Because back then I was always thinking way ahead. I had to be achieving and successful. I think they would have said, James, enjoy the journey. Don't
Yep.
think of the destination so much.
Yep. What do you think they'd be most surprised about where you actually are today and what you've achieved?
I think at that age, they'd be very surprised at what I'm doing and my skill set.
How so?
I don't think it was apparent. I was always interested in people. Yeah, it's age and wisdom and experience and also formal training that has given me the skill sets that I can actually walk into a critical or difficult conversation
Mm,
and actually know how to get the people in the room to a point of agreement. There's no way I could have thought that was possible because there wasn't a lot of, and I still think there's not a lot of people that can do that. So it
yeah, I
wasn't
agree.
something that I was having modeled to me at a young
Mm.
age.
What would they be most proud of about where you're at and what you've achieved?
I think, and this is a joint situation, as with Amanda and I, what
Mm.
we've been able to achieve with our three daughters, and your listeners might be going, yeah, of course you'd say that. But I have three independent daughters who are different. Each of them are different in their own way, but they're strong women who are having influence in their own space. And the lovely part is they actually enjoy each other's company. They genuinely enjoy being together. So yes, that's what Amanda and I are most proud of.
Understandably so. I think any parent would be, and as you should be. What do you think your younger self would be most embarrassed by if they could see you now and where you're at and what you're doing?
I really don't know. Embarrassed.
Did your younger self get embarrassed easily?
Oh, at that awkward teenage years, yes, I was,
Yeah.
thin, dorky teenager. Whereas, yeah, I can let my hair down on occasion and sometimes might look back and go, could have made some more wise decisions. But fortunately, it doesn't happen very often.
So that's it. The most embarrassed by when you have a few drinks and think that you're 20 again. Is that what I'm saying?
Yeah, that would
Like the
be it.
rest of us?
Absolutely.
Um, Now, before we jump into our closing section, what are some of the key takeaways? One of the reasons I wanted to have you on here today is I absolutely, like you, have seen there's a lot of growth in this succession space, and successions at the end of the day, it's a people problem first before it's anything technical. So when I met James and got an understanding of how he works and how he operates, I was very keen to have him on here because I know that he walks the talk. So if there's families listening at home that are stuck or feeling stuck, or what are some of the takeaways you could give them, or the one or two steps they can take? Because sometimes it's that first step that's the hardest.
Absolutely. I think the first step is to agreement that the family is stuck. So
Yeah.
to move people beyond their current position to a future position, there needs to be agreement as to the why. So it's a negotiation. How do you get the family to actually meet with a facilitator, a trained facilitator in succession? You need them to agree. And so it
Yeah.
could be just simply saying, I feel that as a family, we are stuck in our position around succession.
Mm.
And you could even then go a step further and say, as a result of this, what I see is some of the costs to us are around relationships, our inability to seize an opportunity, maybe a business opportunity. And you could say possibly we're in a holding pattern. And then I think if that is your reality, you'll probably have other family members going, yeah, I agree. So you then go, okay, what could we possibly do? So you're putting it out as a speculative question. You're not telling the other family members
Mm.
what they need to do. You're inviting them. So always speculate with your questions. And I think invariably the family would then come to the agreement they need outside help. Look, some of your listeners will be very private people and think, oh, no, we can't talk about this. What I would say to them is by doing nothing, project forward your current situation and look at what the costs are. Your current
Mm.
costs will blow out. And I don't mean just financially.
No,
So,
in fact, I'd say it is more so personally that the blowout increases from inaction. In my experience, what would yours
yeah,
be?
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it's just a family getting to a point of agreement that where they're at currently and the
Mm.
associated costs. And then as a natural progression, what is available to us, who could help and doing some homework. So if they then
Yep.
reach out to someone and what I say to people that are coming to me is I've never gone to a succession meeting with the winning formula. I have the process and the skills that at the end of the session, they then reach an agreement, an in principle
Mm.
agreement. And the beauty of that in principle agreement is they then take it to their professional advisors, their lawyers, accountants, and financiers, and say, this is what we are striving to achieve. Please advise us the best way
How to
forward.
structure it.
Yeah. And look, I've been doing this long enough and with our own business, family business, as in farming, to know
Mm.
that I'm not going to waste a family's time by going off on a harebrained idea. I certainly will keep it at a higher order, bigger picture, because when people fall down into detail, sometimes they lose sight of the bigger picture.
Absolutely. So would it be fair to say then that we already said that people that use you are not people, they're people where the relationship in the family is paramount. It's important. People that are looking for someone to tell them what this whiz bang golden solution is, they're not the people that come to you as well. Would that be a fair? They're not.
Well, I think definitely people coming to me actually are very much after the solution, the whiz bang solution for their family. Absolutely. But I just make the point, I'm not actually saying to them, this is the solution. In working with me, I'll gently highlight where some of the issues may arise in what they're thinking and then address some solutions or find solutions as to how to
Right.
address the cause. And I'm always saying, let's plan for the worst and then hope for the best.
Yeah. Yep. Couldn't agree more, especially when doing cash flow projections. Yeah. Okay. The reason I ask that is I know that, again, through my experience and talking to others, there are some clients that they just want you to give them the answer without necessarily going through the full process. Is that the sort of client? Would you still take on those types of clients?
I would explain to them what I do
Okay.
because invariably those that work, I've seen it. I've had to mop up situations where a
Mm,
family's gone to the so-called expert who says, this is what you need to do. And it hasn't worked. And I've seen a few examples of that. And so cautionary tale, just be careful who people go seeking advice from. That's all I'll
mm.
say.
Yes, couldn't agree more. Always, like anything, and I've said this before, another one, just always look at what people have got invested and the reasons that they're doing the things that they're doing them for. On to other things. So looking forward instead of looking back. What does regional Australia need more of in 2026?
Well, this is, I guess, self-serving in what I'm about to say, but I'm a firm believer that the succession space in rural Australia needs a national conversation. In the last 5 years, it's morphed into all kinds of things. Now, this idea that you can divide a farm equally and have the farm business continue needs to
Yeah.
be challenged. And I'm seeing, particularly in the last few years, where this notion has crept into succession. And I've never seen a farm viable if it were to be divided equally.
Mm.
So if we don't address this, where are the family farms going to be in another generation?
And this is a broader conversation I was having with someone the other day, not on air. Exactly. What will that farming ownership landscape look like if we don't get better at the succession planning and the facilitation? Because the assets are now worth double what they used to be. There's now kids coming back and wanting to be involved on the farm, which is great because there are careers, there's growing industry. But yeah, I echo that concern talking to some other people in the profession the other day. How do we move that forward?
Well, I think, again, it's like what I was saying with the family, that how do they progress the succession conversation? It's one, as a nation, talking about it and that this
Yeah.
is an issue, and also flagging straight up. The solution isn't just to say, right, one child gets everything and everyone else gets nothing.
Mm.
That's not the solution. It's
Mm.
actually working through as a family what is important to them. And in my process, that's what I do very much at the beginning. Unpack
Mm.
what is important to the family. What do they think a successful succession would look like, as in the characteristics? So then we embed that into building out what the particular family that I'm working with, what their succession could look like. And I said at the beginning of this how it's important that every family member can focus on what opportunity they have. So
Mm.
one or two adult children, they want the opportunity to be a farmer. So how can we do that? How can we have the opportunity for the parents to retire with what they need? So they're never going to their children saying, please, sir, may I have? I've
Yeah.
never overseen succession where parents pass on that control. Remember, I always said, let's plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Mm.
So we need the opportunity for the parents to see how their retirement is funded. And I've never worked with a family yet where the parents actually need all of the asset to retire on. And then the children that are off farm, they also want the opportunity to either be able to put down a deposit on maybe a unit in Brisbane or Sydney or Perth, wherever, so they
Mm.
can see that they can create wealth in their own right with the assistance from the seed funding from their parents.
Mm.
So that's what I mean by everyone seeing opportunity.
Yep. Absolutely. And everyone having agency as well, from what I'm hearing there
Yeah.
too.
And
Sounds
look,
important.
my experience has been that when all the family are invited to come to the conversation, particularly those who are not in the business will come with generosity.
Mm,
our spirit of generosity, that is. And if you say no to them, look out. They will actually make themselves known within the process, and they'll
mm,
say, even if it's at a subconscious level, Mum and Dad, sit up and pay attention to me. I am of value.
mm.
So I strongly recommend to parents, even if they've had what they deem a difficult child, include them
Yeah.
in the process.
Important for everyone to have a seat at the table. What does Australia need more of in 2026?
I guess that, and I've spoken about it before, that spirit of generosity.
Mm.
Now, you and I are doing this interview after the horrific Bondi experience.
God, yeah. I still
And
can't believe that's happened in this country and yeah, just
so
horrifying.
from that, let's, as a nation, not let the ugly, evil side
The hate.
get great attraction. So, how can we be a spirit of generosity to our other human beings? And no matter what their background is, and going back to what I said earlier, meet them on face value, how
Yes.
you experience. Don't go on what you've been told or what you think they might be like.
Yep. Great advice. And what does James Hamilton need more of in 2026?
I suspect it may be really being mindful around balance of
Mm.
the different things that I juggle in my life. Yeah.
What might that look like?
Could be squeezing in a little more me time, and that sounds selfish.
No, no, it's not selfish to look after others. We've got to make sure that our cup is full.
And a me time doesn't mean lying on a beach
Mm.
at a resort. I think what would be useful for me if I had more me time to actually just read and reflect more and read for the value of knowledge.
Absolutely. James, thank you so much for joining us on Built in the Bush. It's been a pleasure to get to hear a bit more of your story and to share some of your wisdom in this space with people. For anyone listening at home, we'll obviously put all the things in the show notes, but if you just want to let them know how to get in
Yep.
touch with you.
Send me an email via my website, or they can actually just pick up the phone and call me on 0428 890 151.
Lovely. Thanks very much for joining us, James. Enjoy the rest of your day and look forward to catching up with you soon.
Thank you, and it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for the time you spent with me.
Thanks, James.